As meteorologist Brad Barton and newswoman extraordinaire Lori Waffenschmidt just told you, be weather aware. The weather still continues to be a story here in North Texas. Jeff is the name, Westside Jeff. I was born up in Ohio, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, so I'm used to some tough weather, some bad weather. My question for you and what I want to talk about is we're talking about the weather conditions, not just the last couple of days, but over the next several hours. As Brad Barton, meteorologist Brad Barton has been saying, we have freeze warning going on here across the area through 6 a.m. winter weather advisory with their freezing fog advisory. Our temperature is supposed to get down somewhere around 20 degrees or so, and that makes it really difficult when there's fog in the area because fog is moisture, and moisture freezes, and the freezing on the roads can make it difficult. I got a Facebook message from Abraham. Abraham said, "Hey, Jeff, you're talking about weather forecasters and the media. Did they overhype it or not?" And he said, "The media nailed it, Jeff, especially so road and bridges officials can secure roads as much as possible for us drivers." Abraham said, "I'm driving right now north of 636 in the Richardson area." He said, "The water on the road is beginning to freeze. I'm in a 4x4 with new tires, and it is scary." As I said, I replied to him, say, thank you, Abraham. I think I said Anthony. I apologize, but Abraham. I'll share your comments on the radio and stay focused. If you're out driving right now somewhere, I'd love to hear your feedback on what you're experiencing. That's the beautiful thing about the radio is exactly that. The radio is a community conversation. It's a conversation with the community. It's an opportunity for folks in the media, for us to be able to talk to you about where you are, what you're experiencing. As Abraham said, he's up on 636. Where was it? Driving north of 636 in Richardson area, and the freezing fog is coming into effect there, and he's slip sliding around. 800-288-9227 is my number. 800-288-WBAP. You'll talk to Garrett Tarango, my producer. Again, we've got Lori Waffenschmidt in the newsroom coming up at the bottom of the hour, and Brad Barton with us also with continuing updates on what's going on. We took a call a little while ago from a trooper that said there are a lot of accidents across the North Texas area, a lot. And he said people are driving too fast, they're hitting those ice patches and creating accidents. It's a real problem. So pay attention, drive carefully, and if you've never experienced black ice, I have, you don't want to. You'd be driving along thinking, there ain't no problem here, road's fine, it's just normally wet. You go over an overpass somewhere, you hit a patch of ice, and next thing you know, you're into a guardrail or the side of the bridge, or something worse. You got to be very careful. Again, as you're driving around out and about across the area, I'd love to hear your perspective and what you're experiencing. How are the roads? What are you experiencing? What are you seeing? Have you seen accidents, people slip sliding around? 800-288-WBAP, 800-288-9227. Tipping is a real problem today. It continues to be a problem. Through the holidays, as I was out shopping, I was appalled that I walked into a local hardware store, local hardware store, to buy some stuff, and at the counter was a big jar that said tips and gratuities, and not only a big jar that said tips and gratuities, it also, when I went to ring out, it prompted me to leave a tip. I was like, come on, that's crap. A hardware store. What did you do to deserve a gratuity, a tip at a hardware store? Tipping is out of control. Tipping is a real problem. And it's costing, it's impacting businesses that should deserve tips. The ones who really work for tips. Servers. The amount of money we're spending in restaurants these days because of inflation and food costs and so on is getting exorbitant. And because of that, the amount of time we're spending in restaurants and the amount of money we're spending in restaurants is less than it was in 2023. So last year in 2024, we spent less in restaurants than 2023. People are tipping less at restaurants than they have in at least 6 years, and it's driven by fatigue over rising prices and growing prompts for tips at places where gratuities haven't historically been expected, like me shopping in the hardware store over Christmas. I actually had a listener not long ago, because I've talked about this before, a listener not long ago sent me a screenshot, a picture. They were going through, I think it was a Jack in the Box here. I don't know which store, but a Jack in the Box somewhere here in North Texas. And on the little counter area of the drive-thru, you know, when you go through a drive-thru and they open the drive-thru window, there's just a little counter there that they can set things on. On that little counter, there was a big old cup from Jack in the Box with the big words tips written on it and taped down to the counter. A drive-thru. That's nuts. That's unacceptable. No, I'm sorry. I'm not going to tip you. There were 4 or 5 times over the holiday, I ordered a pizza outside of my immediate delivery area because I want to try different kinds of pizza. And I drove 20, 25 minutes to pick up a pizza. And I can think of one particular store. I walked in, I ordered a pizza. I walked into that store and picked up a big old pie, and it prompted me to leave a tip. And it literally, I had to almost leave a tip. I literally, in a very busy restaurant with 8-10 people standing behind me waiting for a table, with 3 more people picking up some food items, with 3 people working behind the counter, a little bit of a loud area. I get ready to pay, and it prompts me for a tip, and there was no place to say no tip. So I had to say, where do I push for no tip? And I got that look like, really? You're not going to tip us? Tipping is out of control, and it's a problem. I want to talk about it coming up in about 6 minutes. But first, let's talk to Steve in Carrollton. Steve, thanks for listening to the show. You're talking to Jeff, Westside Jeff, on News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP. How are the roads where you are?
Westside Jeff from Columbus, Ohio.
Attaboy.
This is Steve from Carrollton. First, let me ask you, do you take tips?
Yes, you can give me a tip on what to be better about. Yes.
Here's your tip. It's not 636. It's 635 LBJ Freeway.
Oh yeah, I got that wrong. I was trying to read and talk at the same time.
I understand. 635 is a loop around the city, and it's part of the I-35 corridor. So hence 635. Well, there's your tip. In Carrollton, the roads are beginning to freeze. I've got a 4-wheel drive, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many wheels are driven. It doesn't matter if you've got what I'm experiencing. I've got a 4-wheel drive truck. When it's not in 4-wheel drive, it's in rear-wheel drive, and I'm experiencing my rear wheels pushing me forward. And sometimes the rear end tries to break loose and slide around the front. Most of today's modern passenger sedans are front-wheel drive. So I've got these yeehaws all around me. They're driving way too fast. Yeehaws. Yes, sir. Yeehaws. They're driving. Well, that's a kind way to put. Kind of way to. So most of our automobiles these days, the sedans, are front-wheel drive.
Yeah.
So in that case, the wheels are pulling the vehicles forward, and most of these people don't know that they're beginning to slip and slide, like I do, because I've got the rear-wheel drive.
Yep.
So it's starting to get treacherous. It's 34 up here in Carrollton. I live in southern Denton County, North Carrollton, so it might be 33. By morning, if it's going to be 20 or 25 degrees, forget about it. All of this water on these roads is going to be ice. And
refreezes.
It's already becoming very dangerous up here in southern Denton County.
Thank you, Steve, for checking in. It's exactly what Brad Barton's been talking about. We'll have Brad at the bottom of the hour coming up in about 15 minutes, along with Lori Waffenschmidt in the newsroom. We'll continue the coverage about how are the roads where you are. I'd love to hear it. Like Steve from Carrollton, my number is 800-288-WBAP, 800-288-WBAP. As Steve just said, it doesn't matter whether you have 2-wheel, 4-wheel, or 20-wheel drive. It doesn't impact it doesn't stop you from sliding all over the freeway like he is and others are. Love to hear your comments. 800-288-WBAP. Westside Jeff is my name here on News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP. One of the things I talk about pretty regularly is if you do not have the app, you should have it, WBAP. Go to your phone and type in WBAP in your app store, download it. If you have it, you just got the breaking news alert that I did literally about 4 minutes ago that said breaking news is traffic alert. Southbound lanes of US 75 in Sherman are closed due to a 6-vehicle wreck, including 2 18-wheelers. Again, that's southbound lanes of US 75 in Sherman are closed because of a 6-vehicle wreck, including 2 18-wheelers. We took a call a little while ago from a trooper who called Garrett and said, hey, people are driving way too fast and skidding around, and there's way too many accidents because they're not paying attention. We took a call a moment ago from Steve in Carrollton that said he's on the road up, and I think he said in Carrollton, and he said there's moisture on the roads, it's freezing and refreezing, and it's very slippery. As he said, he's driving a 4x4, and he said that doesn't matter. One of the things I know about ice, Jeff is the name, Westside Jeff. One of the things I know about ice is that it doesn't matter how many, if you have new tires or not, 4-wheel drive or not, doesn't matter. Ice, you can't overcome it. There ain't no way to overcome it. So you got to be very careful, and the roads can be very difficult this time of year. So I'd love to hear your perspective where you are and how the roads are where you are. 800-288-WBAP, 800-288-9227, Westside Jeff on WBAP. One of the things that happens, I mentioned a few minutes ago, I want to get into is this time of the year when you get into wintertime, you get into some bad weather, whether it be significant rainfalls or colder temperatures. There just comes a time this time of the year where, I do it all the time. I get home from work, my day job, I look at the wife and say, I'm in the mood for Chinese, I'm in the mood for some kind of food. Let's order. Order out. We talk and we'll order something out. My style, though, is to go pick it up because my opinion is I feel bad for those who deliver food. I feel bad for those in restaurants who are short-staffed. I feel bad for those of you that take the calls and people, in essence, are lazy and say, I don't want to go out of my house. I want to order a good meal, and I want you to deliver it to me, and I want it to my door in a specific amount of time. And then they don't tip you, and they don't tip you very much. My attitude is, if you're going to order food out, why don't you do it in the middle of springtime when it's 70 degrees and beautiful outside? It's because you're fine going out. But when weather gets bad, it's very common, it's very typical that we as consumers tend to order out more. We order food to be delivered to us. I'm not just talking pizza. Yes, pizza is part of it. But any other kind of a food item. And it's rooted back in the scenario that I mentioned a moment ago, that when I was doing radio up in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I was born and raised, I was on the radio up there during a snowstorm that dropped about 10 inches of snow across central Ohio, and was talking about this very thing. And I regularly would get calls from people who deliver food through Uber Eats or DoorDash, with story after story after story about how ungrateful people can be when you're delivering food to their home. And my opinion is this: when you find the weather is good, you're less likely to order out and have it delivered to you. But when the weather gets bad, and I'm talking it gets dark earlier, I'm talking about colder weather, I'm talking about rain, I'm talking about freezing roads or snow, people tend to order out more, and they'll order it delivered to their home. And they're crankier than ever before. And they're less gratuitous than ever before. And you got to realize that when you order out and the food item gets delivered to you, it's not going to be as hot and fresh as a food item as you go in and sit in the restaurant, because somebody in a restaurant has to make the food, has to package it up. And even if it only sits in the restaurant for 3 or 4 minutes before a delivery driver picks it up, and then you get some tough weather like we've had this last week, or, freezing roads like we're experiencing tonight, and it takes 10 minutes or 12 minutes to get delivered to your door, and the time that you pay the delivery driver from the time it comes out of the oven or the time it comes off the skillet to the time it hits your plate and you sit down to eat it, it could be 30 minutes. And the integrity of the product can sometimes get compromised, depending especially on what you order, especially French fries. Certain food items don't travel well. And when it gets to your door, I'm encouraging you, I'm telling you, be gracious. Be gracious to those who bring food to you. Anybody that's ever delivered food for a living will tell you it's quite the opposite many times. And it comes back to a story I saw earlier this week about tipping is on the decline. People are less generous with tips. The average tip at full-service restaurants dropped to 19.3% for the 3 months that ended September 30th and hasn't budged much since. That's according to an organization called Toast, which operates restaurant payment systems. Now, that's in restaurants. But the restaurant tipping to restaurants who deliver and delivery drivers is even worse. I mentioned earlier about a story about when I was in the radio up in Columbus. I took a call from a lady that during a snowstorm, it was about 8 inches of snow at the time, who runs a Chinese restaurant. And she said, first of all, they're short-staffed because several folks couldn't get in their vehicles and get to the restaurant to work because they were snowed in. But those who did and made the commitment were working their tails off as phone calls were coming in to order food. And the lady told me she remembers one particular family that ordered a meal for, I think, 4 or 6 people. I forget what it was. And she got in her car and delivered it to the homeowner. And it was she said, about a 30-minute drive that during normal non-weather related events should have only taken her about 10 minutes to deliver. But she made the commitment. She goes up and walks through 8 inches of snow that had not been shoveled, goes up, knocks on the door. The guy who answers the door, she hands him a sack and says it'll be $39.95. He hands her 2 20s and says, keep the change. Her response? Her response was brilliant. I'll tell you what that was. You got to hit the bottom of the hour news. I'll tell you what that was in about 8 minutes. You got to hit the bottom of the hour news with Lori Waffenschmidt and Brad Barton in the newsroom with updates on weather and the events going around the community. We also have the Cotton Bowl going on here in Arlington coming down to the final end, and people will be out on the road soon. Westside Jeff, I want in tonight on WBAP. Love to hear your comments on what you're seeing on the roads at 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP, talking about delivering food to your door and the lack of tips and what consumers would do and what they'd say. And what one woman responded to, I want to tell you what that is after the bottom of the hour news. News coming up in 2 minutes. I'll be back in about 6 minutes. Westside Jeff on News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP. Talking about the weather and what's going on here in our area, and continue to get calls. Garrett, my producer, tells me he continues to get calls from people that say, yeah, I don't want to talk on the air, but it's really bad out here. There are just some areas of the community where, as Brad Barton and Lori Waffenschmidt just identified, that we have freezing fog. And if you, some areas of our community are experiencing that. We've taken several calls like that of people saying, yep, I got it, and I'm sliding all over. One guy called, I forget his name, but he said, I got a four-wheel drive vehicle, but that doesn't mean anything. That's not helping anything. The fact is we got freezing fog advisory in effect until 9 a.m. tomorrow. You got visibility in some areas as less as 3 miles or less. Portions of North Texas are expecting temperatures down to 20 degrees tonight. And when you have the moisture in the air like fog, as Brad Barton just so explained, and temperatures like it is, it freezes. And if you're driving on it, it can be very dangerous. You can all of a sudden be driving along and all of a sudden lose control of your vehicle and run into an accident. As Lori Waffenschmidt just said, several areas around the metro area have roads closed. Saw the breaking news alert on my app, my WBAP app. If you don't have it, I encourage you to download it. Southbound lanes US 75 and Sherman are closed due to a 6-vehicle wreck, including 2 18-wheelers. Again, that's off my WBAP app. If you don't have it, open up your phone, go to your app store, type in WBAP, download it. You'll get those notifications like I do. I'll pass them along to you as I get them. News coming in the newsroom, as it does, I'll let you know what's going on. Westside Jeff in with you tonight. We're talking about one of the things that happens, and I mentioned a moment ago, I tell you what she said, is as we get in the wintertime, one of the things we find is that consumers spend more time at home and less likely to go out and dine in restaurants. So what they do is they order food out. So I've done it. I do it a lot. Mrs. Westside Jeff and I many times will order food out. But differently for me is I'll actually drive out and get it because I've sat here on the radio and you and I have talked about it a lot. As I continually hear people, DoorDash and Uber Eats drivers and delivery drivers call me and tell me these stories, it just incenses me what I hear. And because of that, I mean, I had a guy call me once and say, you know what? My job is delivering food to people, and I'm grateful to have the job and the opportunity to do it, and I love doing it. But what I'm doing is I'm catering to lazy people, and lazy people don't want to tip. As I mentioned a minute ago, I used to do radio up in Columbus, Ohio, where I was born and raised. I remember being on the radio up there during a storm that dropped about 8 inches of snow. And a woman who runs a Chinese restaurant said that a lot of the staff called off because of the weather. They couldn't get in. And they were overwhelmed. Phone calls. It happens all the time. Happens here in Texas. It gets cold. It gets a little moisture in the air. And people say, I don't want to go outside. I'll order the food and have it delivered. Well, in this case, the woman delivered food to a family of either 4 or 6. I forget what it was. And the tab came to $39.95. She got out of her car. It took her 30 minutes to get to the house for the delivery. It normally would take her about 10, but because of the weather, it took her 30. She got out of the car. She walked up to the door, 8 inches of snow and walks that weren't shoveled. So you can imagine walking through 8 inches of snow, about a 100-foot walk from where she parked to the front door. The guy opens the door, hands her 2 $20 bills because the tab is $39.95. Now, for those of you Philadelphia Eagle fans, let me help you. It's a 5-cent tip. She said, the gentleman said, keep the change. It's a nickel. What'd she say? She said something differently than I would have said. She said to me on the radio, she said, I looked at him with the most loving eyes and said, sir, it's $39.95, and I appreciate you giving me $40. Clearly, that nickel is more important to you than it would be for me. You keep your nickel. And thank you for ordering food from my restaurant. And I love delivering the food, and I hope you enjoy it. And I look forward to delivering food to you every time you call. You have a great night. She turned around and walked away. I thought that was a brilliant way to handle that. I thought it was great. I wouldn't have been so nice. Curious what you would have said. You're delivering food. What about those of you who do deliver food or have delivered food? You get delivery in the middle of a storm, weather's bad, somebody wants it brought to them. You go to their house, takes you 30 minutes to get there when normally maybe 10 minutes because of weather conditions. You go up the door, it's $39.95. They hand you 2 $20 bills and tell you keep the change. What would you, if you were a food delivery person, what do you say to them? How do you handle it? What do you do differently? I'd love to hear your input. 800-288-WBAP, 800-288-9227. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. And for those of you consumers who order food out, what do you think? Would you ever do that? How would you handle that? Have you experienced anything like that? And how would you handle it? 800-288-WBAP. When weather gets bad, when weather gets dicey, when the elements get to the point that we don't want to deal with it. You know, we live in an environment where we are spoiled consumers these days because we have heated seats or air-conditioned seats. We have automatic starts for our cars or our vehicles. we can keep the environment simple and easy, we've come to expect almost perfection. But when something goes awry, how do we respond and what happens? 800-288-WBAP, Westside Jeff on WBAP. We order out food more often in the wintertime than we do in the summertime. Summertime, springtime, we like to get out and enjoy the restaurants. So we like to be outdoors. But this is the time of year, a lot of time, we like to say, bring the food to us. And we get angry when it doesn't come to us in the right amount of time. We get angry when the food comes to us and it's not perfect. There's just some foods that don't travel well. French fries don't travel well. Onion rings don't travel well. Some hot foods don't travel well. Some foods, 30 minutes from the time it comes out of the oven to the time it hits your plate and get ready to eat it, doesn't taste the same. Yet our expectations are that. And we've got to understand that when we have food delivered, we need to do a better job of rewarding and tipping those who bring it to us. This is on the heels of a story I saw earlier this week about people are tipping less in restaurants and to restaurants who deliver than ever before in the last 6 years. The decline highlights a bind that restaurants find themselves in as they face rising costs and ingredients and labor problems and customer frustration over spiraling bills. Tips are down. And I believe that tips in part are down because there are places demanding tips that shouldn't be. And it comes back to an experience I had at the Christmas time. I was actually in a hardware store buying some Christmas gifts, and there was a tip jar asking for a tip in a hardware store. It's a retail location asking for a tip. That's crap. That's BS. I was almost bold enough to say, you know what? Take your tip jar and get the heck out of Dodge. I can't say what I really wanted to say on the radio. I understand tipping in environments, but not in all environments. I've talked about tipping before, and I actually had a listener send me a picture of a Jack in the Box big cup sitting on a counter on the drive-through window. So this consumer drove through the drive-through window, ordered food, a typical drive-through window exchange, and there was a big jar there, a big cup there. It said tipping, and it's almost expected. Tipping is out of control. Do you agree? Do you not? What do you think? Where have you seen tipping? How out of control do you think it is? And how do you respond? I actually took a call once. A guy said he was in an automatic teller location in the airport. He walked in one of those places in the airport that has no employees. That you go in, you have to put your credit card in and pay for something, and it dispenses it, and it requested a tip. Out of control. Tipping's out of control. But tipping is required, in my mind, in some places, and especially weather like this when you order food out and it gets delivered to your door. I want to hear your comments on tipping. I want to hear your thoughts on, are you over-tipped? Are you not over-tipped? What are you experiencing? What do you think? What's your opinion? How do you feel? Is tipping out of control? My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. My phone number is 800-288-9227. You can also hit me up across social media at Westside Jeff. On Facebook, on X, on Instagram, at Westside Jeff. I want to take your calls. Want to hear your comments. 800-288-9227. 800-288-WBAP. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff on News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM, WBAP. Westside Jeff, and tonight, WBAP. We're following a lot of stories and some breaking news. I'll keep you up to speed. Coming up in about 12 minutes, Lori Waffenschmidt in the newsroom with an update on some of those stories. Several traffic problems across the community. I'm catching up on that. It's hard to stay on top of that. Lori can't interrupt me while I'm talking. I can't talk to you and with you and to her at the same time, but I'm keeping up to date with all the breaking news alerts I continue to get from the radio station here. If you don't have the app WBAP, go to your phone. Your app store, type in WBAP, download it, and you'll get the breaking news alerts like the one I got moments ago that said southbound lanes of US 75 in Sherman are closed due to a 6-vehicle wreck, including 2 18-wheelers. Took several calls, a couple calls from a couple troopers that told Garrett, my producer, said people are driving way too fast. As Brad Barton has indicated, we have freezing fog advisory through tomorrow morning, and the fog is moisture in the air, and it's freezing on the surfaces and creating for basically an ice skating rink in some areas and creating a problem. The troopers have said people are driving way too fast, so slow down. A couple guys, troopers have said, can't go on the air, but please tell your listeners to slow down because people are driving too fast. The name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. We're talking about food and delivery. This time of the year, as we come into winter, as weather gets tough, freezing roads, the snow we just experienced, we tend to, as consumers, order out more often and have food delivered to us. And it's nuts, the stories I've heard. I'd love to hear your story. Got a couple calls we'll get to in 60 seconds. First, I got a note from a regular listener, Kevy, that said, hey, Jeff, I used to work I delivered for a while for Uber Eats. This is Kevy. He said, it's been a while since I've done it, but what angered me most were the people who promised a $10 tip. And when you deliver to the door, they change it to $1 or just took it away completely after you delivered it. So maybe Uber has done something to fix that. I don't know. But customers figured out they had to put in a decent tip up front to get the food delivery, and they would try to cheat the system. And, Kevin, I got to tell you, it really surprises me that a human being would do that. A human being would say, hey, I'll deliver, a consumer would say, I'll tip you $10 to deliver all that food to me. Just get it to me, and I want it fresh and hot and all that good stuff. And then they change it once you get to the door. It stuns me, some of the stories I hear from food delivery drivers. Love to hear your story. 800-288-WBAP, 800-288-9227. Let's talk to Hank in Wichita Falls. Hank, I understand your wife delivers, and you got a few stories for me. Tell me about those.
Yeah, she had a grocery delivery. She had 6 cases of bottled water, and they went to a third-floor apartment, and the elevator was broken. She had to carry each one individually up the stairs, and when she got to the last one, she knocked on the door. The guy opened it up, and he was like a big old bodybuilder. He even had a dumbbell in his hand. He's covered in sweat. And she goes, "That's $36.50." And he hands her $35 and says, "I'm a little short."
You got to be kidding me.
She takes the $35. She takes the last case of water, chucks it over the railing from the third floor, and walks away. And never heard a peep from nothing.
Wow.
Great.
So guy orders 6 cases of water to the 6th floor. The elevator's broken. She's got to carry 6 cases up, and he's $1.50 short.
Yeah, and he's a big old bodybuilder.
You know what? That takes a major kahunas to do that. If I were a delivery person, I'd put it on the do not deliver list. You know what I mean?
She did.
Stunning. You got another one for me, or is that hopefully that's the only one you got?
Actually, I got a hint about driving in freezing fog. I'm a truck driver.
Oh, love to hear it. As you know, Brad Barton keeps telling us we got freezing fog, and we've got troopers who've called and said people are driving too fast because there's black ice out there, and they're slipping all over and running into accidents.
Right. I've driven in it a lot. Anyhow, the trick is make sure your dash area is clean, and turn your defrosters on full blast, high heat, and crack each window about a half an inch. And that will help defrost the windshield. Also, your headlights are going to freeze over, and your visibility will be reduced. So every now and then you got to get out there, scrape the headlights. If you don't have a scraper, you can use a credit card.
Oh, thank you, Hank.
Yeah.
Thank you for the tip. Hank, thanks for listening. Thanks for calling. The thing that gets me when we have snow like we did recently is I've talked about this before on the radio. I'm a flipper. I call it a flipper. And that is where, when you're driving and you've got snow and ice and the snow and ice builds up on your windshield and your wiper and it freezes and you can't get it off. I'm that guy driving down the road. I open my driver's side window, and as a wiper comes up to the top, I grab it real quick, pull it away from the window, and flip it and let it get the ice. That's how you get the ice off. Now, I'm not recommending that to anybody, but it worked for me. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. We're talking tipping in restaurants, out of restaurants, and what happens during bad weather, how consumers get lazy and ask you to deliver stuff to the door and don't tip. I want to hear your stories. Got a lot of drivers that listen to the radio station, a lot of those who have delivered food before. I want to hear your stories. As you just heard the gentleman up in Wichita Falls, Hank said, the experience that he had, somebody come up short in bad weather and just absolutely screwing him. Bad experience. 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. Got to hit top of the hour news. On the other side of that, we'll continue conversation. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff on News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP.